That's right, folks. Another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Bobby LaMarco. Today, we're here to break down the way too early tight end rankings. Yesterday, we discussed quarterbacks. Today, we're breaking down tight ends. Later next week, we'll break down running backs and wide receivers. We're getting ahead of the rankings to talk a little bit about the NFL coaching changes, key injuries like T.J Hockenson. How far did he fall down Ben's rankings? All this and more starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. Bringing in our global correspondent, Ben Wasley. You could go follow him on Twitter at Fantasy First Down No. Oh, what's going on, Ben?
What is happening? I'm back. It's the fantasy off season, but it's very much still the season for me. I'm a big Chiefs fan, always have been, so I am keen for the Super Bowl. And I'm a big Taylor Swift fan, which is very convenient. So it's all working out for me this week. Loving it. Ready to go.
Yes, big Taylor Swift fan. Listen, I like that. You know what? At this point, if you can't beat them, join them. We're Swifties. We're really excited. It took every ounce of my soul not to put instead of Travis Kelce, just put Taylor Swift's on top of the tight end rankings. It took everything out of me, but I didn't do it. I didn't want the cheap clicks. We're here for the real clicks, people. All right? Yeah. Absolutely. Here to break down some tight end rankings. Now, Ben, before we get into it, I got questions for you. Go to football.razzball.com and check out Ben's latest article on his way too early rankings. He ranks his top 5 and discusses why he has certain guys there. I guess your first iteration, what is kind of something you surprised yourself about, whether you ranked a player too high, too low right off the bat? Is there a player that stood out before we get into our topics for today?
Look, the thing that really surprised me is how many good tight ends there are this year. Last year, we were kind of like, it's a little bit weak. You really want to be taking your Kelces and Andrews early. This year, I'm like, you get down towards the double digits and you're still talking about Jake Ferguson. He's a totally startable fantasy tight end. So there is so much more depth this year. The rookies coming through and looking good. And we've got more rookies coming in this year. Brock Bowers arriving soon, and it's really hard to know what to do with him because all of a sudden rookie tight ends are getting used a lot. That really reinvigorates this whole position. There's so many good options, and it's really hard just to work out how much do we rate their upside over what someone who we know is reliable can do. So that made it really interesting.
I've never been, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I am going to be super high on rookie tight ends. Not going to do it. I know we got the Sam LaPortas of the world. I know we talked a little bit about getting Dalton Kincaid. But listen, Kincaid's especially, for me, he wasn't consistent. It took the Dawson Knox injury, then Gabe Davis injury. But the Sam LaPorta thing, it was amazing. It was great. He is an outlier. I'm excited because so many people, including you, young man, are going to go out and draft rookie tight ends now in redraft. And I'm sure it's going to be still a little hard hit. And I will just stay away. Until I see it 3 more, I'm not going to buy it yet. So, but yes, it's definitely great to see that these tight ends are now hitting the ground running, becoming pass catchers. We need more players at the position, which is a perfect segue because we're going to break down your top 12 right off the bat. Starts off with Sam LaPorta, by the way, as your number 1 tight end heading into 2024. Then you got Andrews, Travis Kelce, Trey McBride, David Njoku, Kittle, Engram, Goedert, Kmet, Kincaid, Hockenson, then Ferguson. But let's talk about that Sam LaPorta over Travis Kelce. What's the deal here? Why do you have him ahead of Kelce heading into 2024?
I mean, it's all a risk issue. When early in your draft, if you're going to take a tight end early, you need someone safe. You need someone that you know is going to be reliable. And for years, that was Kelce. Kelce had so many consistent 1,000-yard seasons. You just knew he was probably going to be the tight end one. And if he wasn't, he was going to be very close. The reality is he is very close to falling off that cliff. We don't know if it's going to happen this year or not. It probably won't. He'll probably be absolutely fine. But I'm not willing to risk a really early pick on a guy who might totally fall off a cliff and might suddenly not be the top guy that we want him to be. Sam LaPorta, on the other hand, he's only rising. He's a sophomore tight end. That's usually the breakout season. He's already had his breakout season. We have no idea what he can do next. I don't expect the Kyle Pitts drop-off. That was all Arthur Smith going crazy. I think Sam LaPorta is going to remain a reliable option. Really, the only thing that could drop him down for me is if they draft a really good wide receiver in the first or second round. Other than that, I'm taking Sam LaPorta first, and I'm not even thinking twice about it.
So, okay. It's unprecedented territory, all right? Because LaPorta was dominant. He was. We have never really seen dominant tight end play without like quirky volume like Evan Engram. Remember the Giants, every receiver got hurt, so they ended up throwing to him 120 times. Even he was not as good as this Sam LaPorta. So I get that. But the other thing that worries me is when you're looking at the upper echelon of tight ends. Travis Kelce had a down season. He still averaged 14.8 PPR points per game and was a tight end one on a per game basis. So that's still better than LaPorta. The other thing is, like, when you look at the elite guys, when you go from Rob Gronkowski, Jimmy Graham, Mark Andrews, Darren Waller, Travis Kelce, Jordan Reed, Zach Ertz, these guys who take the next level of being – because it's not about being tight end one. It's about, can they be 17 PPR points per game tight end one, 18, 20 points per game. All those guys have one thing in common. They led their team in targets. And with Amon-Ra St. Brown, I just don't think LaPorta will ever do that because Amon-Ra is going to be the one. So I do think that caps his upside to being the upper echelon, get to that Travis Kelce level and Gronk level type player. The other aspect is Travis Kelce himself. If you look at, there really is, these are two unprecedented things, right? Like this dominant, this late in his career, the only guy that comes to mind is Tony Gonzalez. And if you look at Gonzalez's late career, he actually didn't drop off much in his final 3 seasons. He was still he averaged 13.8 PPR points his last 3 seasons. That's what Sam LaPorta averaged this season, folks. And Gonzalez wasn't as good as Travis Kelce. So there's nothing from an age standpoint. And watching how dominant Kelce has been in the playoffs, if they win or lose, if they win this week, next week, my apologies, the Chiefs, their motivation's going to be to win 3 in a row. And I could see if Andy Reid comes back and Patrick Mahomes comes back, I think that something happened early on, but whether it was an injury or just kind of going through the motions because they're so good, they're like, oh, we'll make it the playoffs, so we'll turn it on then. But watching the playoff run for Kelce, I'm like, man, he's got 17 PPR points a game upside again, probably next season. And with the fact that Rashid Rice has emerged, it just takes attention away from Kelce, which I think is good as well. But any thoughts about versus Kelce before we move on to the next topic?
I mean, I think the Rashid Rice thing you bring up is really interesting. Rice is someone who's only going to emerge more in his second year. He's only going to improve. He's the guy that's on the up in the Chiefs. And realistically, they're going to need to bring in more pass captures. It would not be surprising if they spend their first round or second round pick on another pass catcher. They need to improve in that area. It was terrible. And it's something that they're going to have to sort out either in free agency or in the draft. On the other hand, with the Lions, I really don't think they do. I think they've got enough people there. I would be surprised if they draft someone early. I do think LaPorta is heading upwards. I was really high on LaPorta going into this season, admittedly. He was a top 12 tight end for me entering the season. And I just feel like I'm still really high on him. I just think he's really talented. I think he is literally that number one guy. And I think he is going to improve this season. I love Kelce. He's the reason I'm a Chiefs fan. But having said that, I just think it's so risky. I just can't take him that early. There's going to become a point in drafts where you have to take him. But for me, I'd rather take LaPorta and Mark Andrews over Kelce as well.
Would you take Sam LaPorta in the second round of drafts next year?
Probably not. I just don't think the positional scarcity is there like it used to be. The reality is that you've got a whole lot of guys who are all pretty similar. And so while I like LaPorta more than those guys, I'm more likely to just wait and see whichever one falls to me. I think it makes more sense to wait on tight end and take those positions that have more upside.
Yeah, I agree too. We just did a first 2-round mock and we didn't take any tight end. So I agree with you on that one. There is a lot of optimism with the Njokus and the McBrides and those guys that are really exciting. And that brings us to the next topic, which I really love. Outside of the other guy we did talk about, which was Mark Andrews, you have Trey McBride emerging as a tight end 4. Last year, you had guys like George Kittle, Dallas Goedert, even Darren Waller was getting up there too as the top 4 range guys. Those guys have kind of all fallen off a little bit, except for Kittle. But you have Trey McBride. Now, this guy might be the number 1 option on his team. Like, he could be the number 1. So talk to us about McBride, why you think he's the 4th best player heading into this offseason.
Yeah, McBride's a really interesting one. He was terrible to start the season. The first 5 weeks, he scored less points than Sam LaPorta scored in 2 individual games. There were 2 games where Sam LaPorta outscored Trey McBride's first 5 weeks combined. He was useless. He just wasn't getting used. It was too ugly. Now with Zach Ertz gone, with Kyler Murray back, he's consistently getting a heap of targets through that end part of the season, he was getting 9 targets pretty much every single game, and he was turning it into a lot of points. He had 4 top 3 finishes in the second half of the season, a lot of consistency, a lot of 100-yard games. Realistically, he's going to continue heading forward. That's the trajectory we usually see for tight ends. Usually it's 3rd, 4th year, they start to break out and they start to become really reliable. Now, realistically, I do think that the Cardinals are probably going to draft either a Marvin Harrison, probably, but it could be Malik Neighbors or someone like that. They're going to draft someone early in the NFL draft. It makes sense for them. Marquise Brown isn't working, so they're going to have to do something to spark that offense. But I still think McBride is a really good chance of being the top target there, at least in that first season. And I think he's really safe, and I feel he's got the upside as well. There's a lot of things to like about him. For that reason, I'm putting him at 4 because there's so much uncertainty around a lot of other guys just below him. I think that makes him a slightly safer option.
I'm all in. I love Trey McBride. I actually said like 3 months ago, that's probably a lie. Probably like 2 months ago. I was like, I think in Dynasty, I honestly could say, and this is definitely a bold stance, I'm considering Trey McBride as the number 1 tight end over Sam LaPorta. I just think
LaPorta.
Like Kyler Murray, I think a lot of people forget that Kyler Murray's legit. Like, I think his injury, kind of the Cliff Kingsbury thing was a whole, like, process with them. And listen, we can sit here and pretend, like, everyone has their opinions about Cliff Kingsbury. The new Raiders had OC, great, whatever. But I think Drew Petzing and what they did last year, like, that offense overachieved with Josh Dobbs. And then they went to Kyler Murray, and Murray was coming off the serious injury, and McBride looked dominant. Like, he looked dominant, like dominating guys out there, making these tough contested catches. But this guy also looked polished as a route runner. This is it, man. I won't be able to handle any Trey McBride offseason news. I'm going to be like, I can't. Nope, I don't want him any higher, because I'll probably have him right here with you. And I'm going to be like, I don't want him at 3 or 2 because that's crazy, but I'll be losing my mind all offseason because the Drew Petzing offense, we saw it coming from Cleveland. He also had a long time in Minnesota. I think that, we've seen plenty of guys over the years in those offenses play very well. So I think it's going to be fantastic. Plus, you're right. Maybe they get Marvin Harrison, but if they don't, Marquise Hollywood-Brown's a free agent. Is Marquise Wilson, is he ready to be a 1 receiver? We'll see. But man, if there's any uncertainty in the receiving core, McBride will get 8 to 10 targets a week, and I love every second of that. All right, let's get into why we're really here, folks. That's the NFL coaching changes. Over the last few weeks, we've had and by the way, the spider web effect of, the head coaching changes turning into OC changes has just exploded. Like, we had like 8 head coaching changes, but it turned into like 15 OC changes. And now, because everything's going to be different play calls across the board. And when I look at your rankings, you do have a few guys who are going to be impacted by this in your top 12. That includes Dallas Goedert with Kellen Moore now as the OC. You also have Cole Kmet with Shane Waldron coming into town. And then you have Kyle Pitts. Look at you. You're holding one out. You're like lighting a candle for Kyle Pitts. I like that. He's still in the top 12 with Zach Robinson coming into town. Quickly, what's kind of your thoughts about these coaching changes with these guys? Does one stand out to you?
The Dallas Goedert one's really interesting. I think it's going to depend on what they do in free agency and what they do in the draft. Realistically, they've got A.J. Brown, they've got Jalen Hurts, they've got Dallas Goedert, and a really strong O-line, and that's it. Devonta Smith's going into the last year of his contract. I don't really know what they're going to do there, but he is the wide receiver too, and I'm sure they'll keep him there for that last year. Other than that, it's a big mess. All of their other wide receivers are free agents. All of their running backs, except Kenneth Gainwell, are free agents. We're going to see a lot of changes, and it's really hard to know what to do with Goddard until we see what those changes are. Do they bring in a day 1 or day 2 wide receiver? If they do, that's really bad for Goddard. Do they bring in a very strong running back? If they do, that's probably going to help Goddard a little bit, but it will take a couple of checkdowns depending on whether he's a good receiver or not. So I'm less concerned about the coaching change and more concerned about the personnel changes. And I think those two things are going to go a little bit hand in hand, but I'm kind of like holding off until I see what's happening there. The one that really excites me, though, is Cole Kmet, because he's not only getting a new OC, he's probably getting a new quarterback as well. I expect they'll probably go with Caleb Williams, and if so, that's going to be good for him because realistically, Justin Fields just doesn't pass as much as the average quarterback does. Anyone who's going to pass the ball much, and rookie quarterbacks do tend to pass the ball a lot. So if they make a change there, I think that's going to help Cole Kmet as well. He actually quietly had a really good season last year. It was tight end 7 or something along those lines last season, and that's great. I'll happily take that. So realistically, as a guy that you're going to get mid-rounds of drafts, I like the upside there with Cole Kmet. As for Kyle Pitts, I mean, there's always upside there. I know we blame Arthur Smith a lot, but realistically, it's not like Kyle Pitts was playing so well that you had to put him out on the field. He kind of looked fine. He didn't look like the guy he did in his first year. So I think he has a little bit to prove. And for that reason, I'm willing to pick him up kind of quite late in drafts, but take a shot on him, knowing that he's not free, but he's someone that you don't need to pay a high round pick on anymore.
I can't do it with Kyle Pitts. Like, Zach Robinson's coming from the Rams. The Rams, I know Higbee has shown flashes over the years, but he's never been extremely consistent. As soon as they are, if Zach Robinson, who by the way is a PFF guy, but then moved to coaching in the NFL, which is pretty cool, like an analyst at PFF. I think he played a couple of years in the pros too as a quarterback. But anyway, he like that. They want to run a ton of 11 personnel, and that really they want their tight end to block. And Kyle Pitts doesn't do that. So unless they convert him to like a slot receiver full time, they're going to have to completely overhaul that personnel group behind Drake London to really fit what Zach Robinson wants to do. If he wants to mirror that McVay thing. So I think that in year one, I'm going to take a wait and see approach on Kyle Pitts. The other one though, Cole Kmet and Dallas Goedert. I spoke yesterday about Dallas Goedert. All in. Love Kellen Moore. I think him getting finally, hopefully he gets a chance to coach the team he's supposed to coach. Like the Chargers lost everybody. Like they lost every single skill position player, at least at some point in the season. It's wild. So I'm excited for him to be in Philadelphia. Cole Kmet, like Shane Waldron, by the way, one of the heaviest 2 tight end personnel passing sets in the NFL just 2 years ago. Even when they drafted JSN with Tyler Lockett and Metcalf last year, they're only middle of the pack at 3 receiver sets. So he relies heavily on his personnel groupings. He's willing to throw 2 tight end sets out there, and he'll probably have Cole Kmet on the field full time. So I like that too for him. So I do like that call, especially after a very strong season. All right, so to the next one. It's T.J. Hockenson's injury. Now, Hockenson was on his way. He was a steal. Like he was an absolute steal in drafts this year. He was going consistently in that, 5-6 tight end range, whatever, but he was dominating for fantasy football before his injury. Now, the only thing that worries me, I talked a little bit about yesterday with Kirk Cousins, because Kirk Cousins now is dealing with his injury and we don't know if he's coming back. I think a lot of us think he will come back, but still he's going to be injured. T.J. Hockenson's injured. You still got him as a top 10 tight end. What's your thoughts about Hockenson? If you draft him, are you taking a second tight end as well, or are you feel comfortable with him if you can get him much later in drafts by himself?
I mean, he's an upside pick, and you're probably going to have to hold him a little bit during the season. But if he gets healthy, we're talking about a top 5 tight end. And if you can get a top 5 tight end for mid-round, late-round value, that's a big win. It is a gamble, and I don't like taking gambles with early picks, but you're not going to have to spend an early pick on Hockenson. The thing that scares me, he only just had the surgery recently. We're not talking about a guy who started his recovery in mid-December. We're talking about a guy who in February before the season is still doing the surgery. That's a long recovery. It's not as long a recovery as it used to be, and it's certainly an easier recovery than it used to be. But we're also not talking about a very young player. We're also not talking about a small player. We're talking about a big guy with big body and big legs who's going to need to use his knees a lot. So realistically, I'm a little bit nervous about how that's going to go down. I am nervous about the Kirk Cousins thing as well, but there's just so much upside. They get him on the field and they want to use him, even with Jefferson, even with Addison. Hockenson is a big part of their offense. They're just so pass heavy that you want the tight end there, especially if it's going to be T.J. Hockenson. So I'm willing to take a dart throw on him, but it realistically is a dart throw. I originally had him as my tight end 9. He's moved down to my tight end 11 because of that recent injury update. We need to see what's happening. We need more information before we can really actually take a proper shot on him or properly move him down.
Yeah. I've always been, I'd stay away from running anybody who gets hurt. Like, it's just not really profitable, especially when you're talking about the high end guys. You're talking about top 10 tight ends, top 20 running backs. When you're drafting a guy aggressive, the only problem with the tight end position is like it's like a 5 points per game difference from where he would be going, because he was averaging like 14 PPR points. And now where you're drafting him and where you have him ranked, he's probably closer to like 9 to 10. So you're taking a 30% dip in points per game value where you're drafting him. So you're already kind of factoring it in. So that's why, like, yes, I typically stay away, and I'll be interested to see where he lands. Like, because I have no problem taking him if it's round 11, like if he's at 10, 11th round, and then just taking another tight end 2-3 rounds later that I like as well as a sleeper, because in the second half of the season, Hockenson will start getting healthy and he'll start dominating for fantasy, especially if Kirk Cousins is back. So I don't hate keeping him in the top 10. I just think if you do it this way, you probably need to double up on the back end just to cover yourself early on in the season. All right, let's jump on to the last topic for today, Ben. It's the late round sleeper. I mean, everybody loves it. It's everyone's favorite topic, folks. It's the late round sleeper. Now, there's been a lot of changes with coaching staff. So obviously, guys like Pat Freiermuth have Arthur Smith, and Juwan Johnson's going to have a new OC, and Hunter Henry, Gerald Everett. A lot of guys are going to be dealing with new offensive coordinators. But what's your philosophy right now in the sense of like someone that's kind of in your mind? Is there a type of player or situation that you identify for a late round sleeper heading into 2024 offseason?
I think the big thing that I'm looking for is what's going to happen in free agency. Are there teams that believe their current tight end 2 could be their tight end 1? And for that reason, they're willing to just forego the position and trust in the guy who we've thought of as being the backup. The main situation where I think that could be the case is in Houston. I feel like Dalton Schultz being a free agent, he didn't really live up to the expectations there. They seem to actually quite like Brevin Jordan. They didn't previously, and all of a sudden now D'Amico Ryans comes in and Brevin Jordan's the new hotness. And he played pretty well. He is a pass-catching tight end. He's not a blocker. They're putting him out there to catch. I feel like there's just a little bit of upside there with Jordan. He's free in pretty much every league. I would be shocked if he's on rosters in most leagues. So realistically, if you're in a deep league or a dynasty league, he's the kind of guy you can just pick up during the offseason just to see what happens. Even so, I don't ever see him being a top 12 tight end. But again, deep league, it's nice to have a deep stash and just have a go at that. The same thing's happening with the Chargers, with Gerald Everett being a free agent. I feel like it's a little bit unclear what's going to happen there. I think they're probably the most likely team to pick Brock Bowers. They've got pick number 5 overall. I think Bowers is that sort of Kyle Pitts kind of guy where we could see him go in the top 10. And I think the Chargers are the most likely guy to take him there. If he goes there, obviously that ruins all of these plans. It's also possible they pick up someone in free agency, like a Schultz. However, if they don't, then you start getting a little bit interested in Donald Parham, who we have seen be pretty good at times. The problem is that even when Everett's out, he doesn't really have a clear role. He just comes up and pops up with a lot of late touchdowns. So he's more of a early season best ball kind of guy that I like, that could turn into something potentially if everything goes right. The only other area where it's really interesting is Seattle. They've got a heap of free agents. They've lost Fant. They've lost Parkinson. But Will Dissly is not a guy you want. Someone's going to go there and they're going to be really interesting, or they re-sign Fant or Parkinson. But it's hard to know who that's going to be now. So it's more of a watch this space sort of area.
Yeah, and there's a couple of key ones too. You broke down a couple of guys, but Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki are both free agents for the Patriots. And now Alex Van Pelt comes in, who just was a part of an offense that helped David Njoku really surprise. So that's a landing spot for a free agent that could be interesting, especially if rookie quarterbacks, especially if you take a quarterback in the top 3, rookie quarterbacks actually aren't terrible for tight ends. They're much more impactful for wide receivers than you see at the tight end position. So I think you might be able to find a late round sleeper if you're at the tight end position for that team. Another guy that a lot of people might not love to hear, but Johnny Munt, if T.J. Hockenson does take some time away, he became actually a startable tight end. He was actually getting some targets. He might be the guy you pair late, just have the tight end for the Vikings. I know that's not really a sexy one, so I apologize. But my sexy one, here's my sexy one. Davis Allen, Rams. Higbee is coming off a serious injury late in the year, basically a playoff game. So he's probably not going to be ready. And they started giving this kid some work. He had two 4-catch games later in the year in December. he started kind of getting some look in the first place, and he looked pretty good. So if Stafford, McVay, and all those, and they're back, especially with Puka Nacua and also Cooper Kupp, demanding so much attention from defenses, he could be a sneaky dart throw. So I'll have an eye on him. He's not going to be in the top 20 yet, but he's a deeper name that I'm going to keep an eye on. But any final thoughts, Ben, before we close the show on your tight end rankings? And also tell the people where they can find your content as well.
I did want to chip in on the Davis Allen idea. I think that's really smart. I like the idea of Davis Allen. Tyler Higbee is one of the oldest tight ends in the league at the moment, which seems a little bit crazy, but he's going into his age 32 season. So we're not talking about a young guy. We're talking about someone who, coming off an injury, could be pretty close to done. And Davis Allen is a guy they started to trust. They also brought in Hunter Long, but I think we've decided that Hunter Long's not going to be anything. So Davis Allen's the interesting guy, and I love your call on the New England tight end situation. I suspect they drafted Drake May or a Jalen Daniels, and if that happens, they're both guys who are likely to throw to their tight end. The problem is we just don't know who it's going to be. So if in free agency someone turns up in New England, that's a really nice landing spot. They're going to become a good sleeper tight end. As my rankings, you can check them out on Razzball. I'm going to do bi-weekly updates. So every second week, you're going to see updates on my tight end rankings. Plus, if anything interesting happens, you can also check it out on Twitter because I will be mentioning any movements I make there. You can follow me at Fantasy First Down No O, and you can also go to ffdfantasyfootball.com where I have all of my rankings, or you can just hit me up on Twitter or Instagram. I'll answer any questions you have. I've got nothing else to do with my time.
Love it. Love every second. Before we close the show, we do have Jamie jumping in the chat. Jamie, always a pleasure to have you on, man. Talks a little bit about some of the dynasty tight ends. Now, are you willing to put Bowers in that top 4 before he even gets drafted, Ben? What's your thoughts about this kid? Is he going to be a top 4 dynasty tight end right away?
Yes. Realistically, he's really, 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 really good. Brock Bowers is the new Kyle Pitts, the new Sam LaPorta, basically. He's a guy that we know has been good for years coming through, and he's probably going to go very early. Now, his landing spot's going to make a big difference, but realistically, if he goes in the tight end, it doesn't matter who drafts him. If they're smart, they're going to use him. So for me, he's definitely top 5, possibly top 4. It's really hard to compare him to guys like your Mark Andrews types, like your T.J. Hockenson, where they still have a lot of years ahead of them and they're reliable. He might fall behind those guys for me, but he's right in that same range.
Yep. Yeah, and make sure you check us out, by the way, because when we go through these over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about coaching changes. All our rankings are going to be kind of on the latest news and notes, free agency. Like, there's some teams right away. The Dalton Schultz, we kind of talked a little bit about it. Make sure you're checking us out because we write these guys. The Houston Texans tight end situation is a definite thing you got to monitor because C.J. Stroud is awesome. And with Tank Dell coming off his serious injury, that could be a huge, huge landing spot for somebody. You got the Denver Broncos with Sean Payton. They don't even have a tight end. We'll see what they can do, especially at the quarterback position. So make sure you stay with us all off season long as we break down every single position, and we'll do it on the podcast so you guys stay on top of your rankings all off season long. I want to thank Ben Wasley for joining the show today. Go follow him at Fantasy First Down No O on Twitter. And myself, Bobby LaMarco. I'm thanking myself. Thanks, Bob, for just hosting such a nice show. Make sure you follow me at Bobby LaMarco. Make sure you join the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. Jump over to IG and TikTok. And, of course, make sure to go to football.razzball.com for all the information you need to win your fantasy league. Thank you guys for joining once again. We are out of here, folks.